G'day traders, we're going to wrap up of Tuesday the 11th of September. So I just got the daily chart up here. Actually I can just extend this bit of a trend line out here. We're starting to maybe at some stage come back and have another look at that, but you can see at the moment we're still, after breaking higher, we had a little bit of a retracement. Looked like we're sort of coming back to this region here, or maybe even coming down here if they really wanted to get going, but again they're starting to bounce and these buyers are starting to come back. As far as having a bit of a closer look before we get at the really short term charts, here's the 15-minute chart. We've got a good trend line in play now. I haven't really had a good trend line as we really just dealt sideways, so we're just really dealing with support and resistance on the horizontal level, but we're starting to get some vertical support and resistance. You can see this line here, so down the bottom here, 1, 2, 3, it's hit it 3 times there, drew it in there, so that's when it really confirmed once it hit that third time. So just had the line going. Obviously we went away from it, we've come back to it, and what happened is the market sort of doesn't show it up here, but as it came down and hit this trend line here, it had a little bit of reaction to it. It's come back up, it nearly used this resistance, but really confirmed it back here, and just really dealt around it here. And around today, it was certainly playing a part in that as we're going through the market. You're really watching this, because I've got this chart live as I'm trading, so watching what the market's doing, and it was really dealing around the line, so it just really stuck to it, and eventually it's pushed away from it. But one way or another, it was either going to get a bounce off it or use it as resistance, and eventually it's used as resistance after getting above it for a little bit there. But it was interesting to watch the market just for probably half the day, just really dealing and playing around that trend line. So as far as the 5-minute chart goes, very much pressure was starting to build on the upside. You can see here, sort of the pre-market, there's a bit of a range here again. It's amazing how many times this sort of plays itself out. You draw a box around that pre-market like that. It's a good guide. I've spoken about that, doing that a few times, and you can see how it's pushed through. All our markets pushed through together, come back and used it then as support to really push higher from. So when you see something like that, and especially when it starts breaking this sort of area here, it's definitely going to get a bit of a push to the upside. So that's where it's able to go higher and starting to have a go at potentially going up and making higher highs again. Eventually this market's pulled back, so as we're pulling back here, watching what other markets do. Okay, so it's a real, depending on what other markets, is it going to come back and find some sort of support around this region here, or is it going to sort of, rather being a pullback, is it starting a new direction, looking to head back to its lows? This region here, it was a real 50-50. Watching it, the Russell was really trying to head down. It was actually starting to break down through this area. So when this 5-minute buy came out, you can see the arrows there, 5-minute buy. Certainly a buy that I was not interested in at all, just because the other markets were pushing down. But in saying that, you can see quite a bit of solid support, through obviously this little bit of a pivot here, and then down through this region here. And in fact, 1433 has been quite a decent support level throughout the last couple of days. So in the end, it was a level that the ES did hold up from, but eventually you can see it's followed the way of the other markets and pushed down a little bit lower, and then eventually broke down again. So this downside, although it wasn't really persistent or didn't happen with any real sort of consistency, it was sort of a little bit differently to how it does. It sort of popped up here and then went. But even this downside movement, it was sort of predictable, in seeing that the other markets, and it happened really as far back as here, they just weren't keen on pushing up high. They really started to break down, and as a result, ES has eventually followed through. So on the 1-minute chart, so here's this pre-market. We've really got some power push through it. All the markets went together. It's quite sideways, but you can see so definitely some support there at that 32 level. Eventually, that's where it's found that momentum to push up some higher. And then it's through this region here, and this is why even this particular day the price action was a little bit slower. We're looking for the market to sort of pick up a little bit as the traders start to come back from their summer break. But that's why I find the 5-minute chart a little bit better to follow, because it kind of compacts obviously the data. Obviously having a candle every 5 minutes rather than a candle every minute. So through here it's hard to really gauge what's happening. But if you look at the 5-minute chart, you can see other markets breaking down, then just sort of trying to find some sort of resistance before pushing lower. But what's happened is they've popped up a little bit higher than what you'd expect them to, and then eventually they've come down and pushed down lower here. PowerPoint moved. Is that about there? You can see, so not a lot of power points hit in the afternoon, but certainly some there was action happening. It was developing that sort of where it wanted to try and push lower. And you can see that again by just watching other markets. But it didn't happen with any sort of real momentum or with any sort of pace, but eventually it has got lower. So that's a wrap up for Tuesday, and we're back on Wednesday.